Hi, this is Patrick Macias, the author of Tokyoscope, the Japanese cult film companion.
And I'm Matt Alt, author of Pure Invention, How Japan Made the Modern World.
And this is episode 1 of Pure Tokyoscope, baby. They said it couldn't be done.
It's a fusion of both of our titles.
Combining together into hopefully one mighty free weekly podcast coming at you with hot news, discussion topic, and whatever else we can cram into our running time.
Is this like The Man with Two Brains? To quote a famous Steve Martin movie?
Was it The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant?
Classics all. So, what's on the agenda for our podcast? That's the big question.
Well, I don't know. I mean, just real brief introduction. I mean, I've been living in Japan for like 4 years now. I'm just fooling around, goofing off, having living the high life during a global health pandemic. You've been here for what, like 20 years?
Yeah, Hiroko and I, my wife / partner / collaborator, and I moved here in 2003. So yeah, it's coming up on 20 years now, and it has been quite a wild ride.
Yeah, happy Japaniversary. Is that a word?
Yeah, well, not until next year, Then it's going to be Japandemonium, as I think they say. But yeah, it's been awesome. If we're giving our little introductions, I was always into anime and manga and stuff as a kid, and I majored in Japanese in college, and I got a job translating after college, and that, over many twists and turns, brought me here. And I worked as a localizer for many years, localizing video games and manga and stuff. But now I'm here with you, Patrick.
We're here together. So a little bit about me. I don't know. I'm the editor-in-chief of Otaku USA magazine. I've written a bunch of books. I've worked at Crunchyroll. I worked at Viz and some other companies in the anime manga biz. And I thought, like, as the first news topic we should tackle, I wanted to talk about this thing that I read in the Hollywood Reporter. Okay, so this is an article in the Hollywood Reporter that came out on May 16th, and the headline is Con, how Japanese anime became the world's most bankable genre. And then the subhead is, it was once considered a niche genre just for hardcore fans, but streaming has helped turn it into a globally popular juggernaut. Now the Japanese animation industry is scrambling to meet an almost insatiable demand. It's increasingly become a borderless form of mass entertainment.
Well, I was into it before it was cool. I'd just like to get that on the record because that makes me a better person. On a serious note, this actually is the culmination of a trend that has been playing out since the beginning of pandemic and even before that. Like, Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer, emerged as what? It was like the top grossing movie of any kind of last year. Which is pretty amazing for an anime that's like set in the Taisho era of Japan's 1920s and like features a really odd balance of like wacky slapstick and brutal ultra violence. But it's just there's a real hunger for anime out there right now, and actually, like the article says, Japanese animation companies are having a hard time keeping up.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading these kinds of articles for like 20 years now. I mean, it's anime. This subculture is finally going mainstream, and they keep coming out. But the thing that keeps changing is the amount of money on the table.
Yes.
It keeps getting bigger and harder to ignore.
Yeah, it's like real now, right? Because, this isn't like when Starlog wrote, like, Japanimation, check this new stuff out. It's pretty cool. Like, this is actual, like, there's big money behind it. Sony paid $1 billion. And, like, that's the kind of money being thrown around in this space right now. Which is really cool on the one hand, but on the other, it's like, is this money getting down to the people who actually make the animation and work on the animation? That's a kind of a more open question.
They touch upon that in the article. They talk about the dark side of Japanese animation.
You mean like Urotsuki Doji or Wicked City? Is that what we're talking about?
They touch upon those things without really going into them as like a challenge. And there were a couple other things that weren't in the article that, I'm not. These guys did a great job saying how much money anime is worth, and certainly making me want to cash in on it. It was the whole industry is worth something like $22 billion right now, or something like that.
Does that mean my bootleg Macross tapes are worth a fortune now?
I hope so. Clash of the Bionoids.
Yeah, and actually, just as a kind of side note, one of the things I've always enjoyed is watching like young anime fans come onto the scene and like that they believe that anime's history started when they started watching anime, And you kind of see this happening over and over and over again because successive generations of people are getting into anime over and over and over
I mean, I
again.
think that's one of the reasons why the money keeps growing is because every new generation picks up on it, and then the other generations are sticking with it longer.
Well, like it evolved. It evolved. Anime is so much different now than it was when I was a kid. It's not like classic rock. It didn't just stay the same. It actually turned into something new. And I think that's key to why it continues to kind of unfold in the global marketplace.
And this is my favorite paragraph in the entire article. This is I felt seen. Japan's hardcore anime and manga fans, formerly stereotyped as socially awkward misfits, too absorbed in their fantasy worlds to participate in normal society.
That wouldn't explain why I moved from America to Japan 20 years ago. Now, would it?
Well, Japan's a perfectly normal society, right?
It's panty vending machines on every corner.
You can marry.
Patrick.
I'm thinking about marrying a pillow right about now.
Or a hologram. What is it? Like Hatsune Miku. Wasn't there some guy who married Hatsune Miku recently or something like that? Well, this is one of the really funny things, which is that Japanese fantasy worlds and weird Japanese stuff turned to be the entire planet's fantasies and weird stuff, didn't they?
That's wacky. Oh.
Welcome to the 22nd century. Actually, 21st. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
So a couple of things that stuck out of me in that article as not necessarily addressed, and I'm not faulting the Hollywood Reporter. God bless them. They're doing a great job. Was they didn't really talk about the budgets for anime series and why there's so much hunger for this content. You can get a whole season of anime for like US 2 million or 2.5 million. That's comparable. Like an episode of Game of Thrones, an average episode costs 6 million an episode, and not a season. And the Mandalorian's like 15 million per episode. So imagine having 13 episodes of content for 2 million of something that you can immediately turn into merchandise and turn into amusement park rides and all that stuff.
In a lot of ways, that's just a replay of what happened in the 80s because, the Saturday morning fever, all of those cartoons that we, watched as we were eating our Cocoa Puffs as kids and maybe not such kids, most of them, or a huge number of them, were made in Japan because it was simply cheaper to animate stuff in Japan than it was in the States at the time. So you're basically seeing this it's kind of, history repeats, or it rhymes, as they say. Where American production companies are turning to Japan to get the content they need because Japanese are producing it at such a lower cost than it would, cost you in the States, which is interesting to me. I don't know how sustainable it is, especially with the incredible volumes of content being demanded by like Netflix and other streaming services, but it's a chance, for the anime industry to kind of evolve like a Pokemon into its final form.
And the other thing the article didn't really address is allegations on the part of some fans and some professionals that the quality of animation has gone down as a result of all the demand and all the increase in production. You get people like, anime character designer Terumi Nishi on Twitter, like just saying the quality has gone down. And you can often look even just at screen caps of the latest shows, and you can see a huge drop in quality after the first, couple episodes of a new series. And then there's like shortcuts like CGI to kind of shorten production time and keep budgets down and stuff like that. So, I mean, the fight goes on forever. I don't know.
It's artisanal, right? It's handmade, even if computers are used, and you can't really mass produce art. That's the kind of fundamental problem here, which is that you have a pipeline that's it's like a baby bird with its mouth open, like constantly demanding, sustenance. And you just have to keep feeding it. And it's really tough to get creatives to kind of not only create on demand, I mean, that's part of being a professional, but create huge volumes. That's much more, it's tough to scale up anime. Even if you pay more money, which, a lot of these production companies aren't really willing to do to the studios that make it, there's only, so much that you can get by throwing money at the problem. You need people. And Japan's been having a brain drain, or is it a hand drain? I don't know, for illustration and artwork. For years now, because the salaries are so low in the industry, it's tough to make a living. So that's it's a really big problem that's only going to get worse with this increased demand. It's like the double-edged sword. Or is that beam saber?
That's a hopeful note to end the news segment. It's going to get worse, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. Life sucks. And now for the next section.
トラマンが本になって二見書房から出ました。3つのお話が1つの箱に入って390円。みんなで読もうウルトラマンブック。全6巻新発売。お近くの本屋さんでどうぞ。カード式ウルトラ大怪獣100枚第4巻も出ました。
So, moving on
Yep.
to the main topic of discussion of our first episode. So, Matt, I heard you checked out the movies recently.
I went to the movie theater. It was actually probably the most dangerous thing I've done in recent years. Going into a movie theater full of people. And it was full because they were all there to see what, Patrick?
Shin Ultraman.
Yes, the brand new hero who just debuted with this movie, as I recall, right?
No,
He's brand new.
Matt. Don't you know about Ultraman, Matt? Don't you know?
Oh, he has a history? Oh,
Well,
okay.
I wanted to talk about two things. One is like going to the movies post-COVID. Was this the first time you've been to an actual movie theater in Japan since the pandemic?
Yes, I believe so. This is the first movie that I have seen since pandemic broke out. I mean, that wasn't in my house.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, and it was a little white knuckle, I will admit. But, this is Japan, right? So everybody's masked. There's nobody like, performatively declaring that they're not wearing a mask and stomping around the theater and shouting. It was all quiet and very efficient and nice.
Yeah, this is the first time I went to the theater since I saw Rise of Skywalker, which was so good, I swore I'd never go see another movie in the theater again. I wanted to end on a high note. But Ultraman kind of dragged me out of my cave and put on a mask, and I went first thing in the morning to a screening at Hibiya at the Toho Cinema there, which is like my favorite movie theater in Tokyo because no one goes there.
Well, I went and saw it in Kabukicho, the heart and soul of Tokyo, in the Toho Theater with the giant Godzilla on top of it, which felt very fitting. I thought Shin Ultraman was really amazing. It's not really a traditional kaiju movie. It focuses heavily on kind of the bureaucracy of dealing with kaiju attacks in Japan. In that way, it was very similar to Shin Gojira, which had a huge kind of logistical bureaucratic bent to it that turned off a lot of viewers abroad, but people in Japan loved. And I thought Shin Ultraman kind of carried on in that tradition, but also injected way more action. So it was almost a 3-hour-long movie, but it didn't feel that way. It was very brisk.
Shin Ultraman? Shin Ultraman's 2 hours. It's a little under 2 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, that's why it felt so brisk. No, I loved it. I thought it was really, really well done. The CG isn't particularly great, but there's a lot of love put into it. Like, it's one of those kind of dream team moments where the guys who were most responsible for making this, who are Hideaki Anno, perhaps you've heard of him from Evangelion and many other pop cultural touchdowns, and Shinji Higuchi, who directed the Gamera movies, or at least the special effects.
No, Higuchi only did the special effects for the Heisei Gamera movies. And Anno is actually the producer of Shin Ultraman. He's not the director. There's kind of a misconception that he's the director, but it's actually Higuchi Shinji is the director of Shin Ultraman.
And I think that worked to its credit because as much as I loved Shin Godzilla, like a lot of the characters, and particularly the female ones, really came across as anime fetish stereotypes. And you get a lot more natural or at least semi-approachable characters in Shin Ultraman because I think Higuchi's at the helm.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I had a good time. I had a big smile on my face, especially during the first 30 minutes, which is just like, it's a fan film. Like, I don't know how this movie would play for someone who doesn't know anything about the original Ultraman series, because they're using nonstop sound effects, nonstop music cues, like recreating iconic, even just like the poses or the way Ultraman will jump off into the air and stuff like that is direct. It's literally a remake, but it's a fan film and it's nothing but callbacks to the original series. There's very little in it that is like an original thing. But for me, for someone who grew up literally running home from school to watch a new episode of Ultraman when it was airing on TV was rerunning on TV back in the 1980s. I mean, it's they were obviously lobbing softballs at me and I was eating them up.
Oh, for sure. And I think you nailed it. It's a big budget fan film. Like it really feels like the guys in the dorm room who are like, kind of tossing around idea. Well, if I could make an Ultraman movie, it turned into that. But that being said, it's not direct homage. Like they changed a lot. Like the names of the main characters are different. The kind of organization of the science patrol is quite different than it appeared in the original 1966 series. And I think the thing that struck me most was just how quickly they jump into the action. Like they dispose of the entire backstory in literally what feels like a minute. Like it's pretty wild with like interstitial cards and like screen text. Kaiju are attacking. They make this science patrol. Bam! Suddenly, like kaiju are attacking this like village out in the middle of rural Japan, and you're just like really thrown into it, sink or swim.
Like it doesn't really have a strong central narrative through line. It really is like one of those old compilation movies where they just kind of cram together 5 episodes of Ultraman and put it on a kiddie matinee, which is fine. That's how I actually marathon Ultraman all the time. I feel like doing it right now. But like it literally, you can set your clock every 30 minutes. It shifts gears into like another episode.
Yeah, now this kaiju's coming. And which is fine. Like, I don't really, I think that's, if there's any genre that demands like constant kaiju attacks, it's a kaiju, Ega.
Yeah, all the bureaucracy stuff is like there. I think everyone was kind of afraid that this was just going to be like a Shin Godzilla 2, that they were going to really hammer down. They were really going to play up the kind of the metaphors and the subtext and the satire. I love Shin Godzilla. I especially love the first half, which is like almost like a Doctor Strangelove kind of like scary black comedy about sort of 311. Second half, I kind of drift off a little bit more, and it was kind of the case with this a little bit. They didn't, bureaucracy is a part of it, but it's not like a problem. There's really no metaphor here or any kind of subtext. They're just sort of goofing around with Ultraman.
Well, as somebody who actually lived in Japan during the 311, like the whole Tohoku massive earthquake and the tsunamis that triggered the meltdowns of the nuclear reactors, I was here during that. My wife and I were here, and it was a really scary time in many ways, and a really like kind of tragic time. And Shin Godzilla did a really amazing job of satirizing how the Japanese government did and didn't handle that situation well. And I was a little bit concerned, like you were, that this movie was going to be more of the same, but it's not. This, like, Shin Ultraman is a satire of basically how the Japanese government deals with disasters, natural disasters of all kinds, and Japan, and man-made disasters. And because Japan is a country that's like suffered way more apocalypses, if that's a plural word, than most Western nations. It's wiped out by an earthquake in 1923. It's wiped out by Allied fire bombings in 45. It's hit by big earthquakes on a really regular basis and tsunamis and things like that. So like the idea of something big pounding a city into non-existence is not really that far away from Japanese people's minds. And Ultraman is a kind of way of processing that, I think. And it does a really good job of dealing with, that sort of trauma and how the like kind of official bureaucracy deals with it.
Yeah. And Shin Godzilla won the Japanese Academy Award for Best Picture and picked up some other wins as well. So I thought they would probably take the same approach for this, but I feel like they definitely got the note and wanted to make something a little more kid. Ultraman's a kid show. This is kind of like a family film. Like it doesn't really go there. Like it never gets so adult. Everyone I saw it with, everyone in the theater was like wearing like a plaid button-up shirt and looked like, everyone was like otaku.
Yes. Average age 50 plus for sure.
It's a kid's film for the kid inside a 50-year-old man, if that makes any sense.
And it's also funny. It's like funnier. Like one of the things that really surprised me about my audience was that people were like actually like laughing, and that's rare in a Japanese movie theater. People tend to watch pretty quietly. So I was like, oh wow, like people are really reacting to this. And that was really cool to kind of see it in that.
Yeah, I admit I was LOL during like the first 30 minutes, like just over and over and over again, because it was.
Oh yeah, there's so many moments for nerds in there, and it's like it's by nerds, it's for nerds, and like Ultraman is the touchstone for Japan in the way that Star Trek is in the West. So like there's a huge number of people who get the references. And even when they're kind of deep, like, as you mentioned on Twitter, I believe, like a lot of the shots are really calling back the angles. The cinematography is calling back to Akio Jisoji, who directed.
He directed some of the most. He directed, yeah, just not all the episodes, but some very iconic episodes. He's kind of like the visual stylist for Ultraman and Ultra 7. And he favors like just crazy angles, like giant out of focus things in the foreground, and like it's this incredible. I don't know how to describe it. It's both incredible, almost like amateurish, but also like David Lynch or Stanley Kubrick at the same time. I think he knew what he was doing, but Jisoji is like, he has an immediately recognizable style, and it was just hilarious to see Higuchi and those guys like just riffing on that, like in a way that I think they were laughing hysterically as they're framing those shots.
Oh no, sure, and it felt like they were riffing on it. It didn't feel like they were like, "Oh, we're going to do this exact same shot." Like we're going to do that style of shot. Like they processed it, and that was, I think, what I liked best about this. It wasn't aping the old Ultraman series at all. It was riffing. It was like remixing. And I don't know. I wasn't bored or anything at any time during this. I really enjoyed it all the way through, and it's killing me. Like I want to say some more specific stuff, but I don't want to spoil anything for people.
There's something you said on Twitter that like there's a scene, we're not going to spoil anything, but like where kind of the fate of the human race is being decided. Like in a Western movie, this would happen with two guys punching each other for like 20 minutes. But in here, they go to like Jiro Dreams of Sushi and like drink shochu and just talk it out.
It's such a Japanese film in a lot of ways. And what I mean by that is like the reactions to catastrophe are so much more muted than you would see in the West. Like even in the scenes of people evacuating towns when the kaiju were coming through, you don't have those kind of like screaming villagers or screaming like city folk like you did back in the 60s. People are just kind of quietly evacuating because the military is helping them evacuate. Then like it's not a panic movie. Like a lot of kaiju movie tend to be. It's a much more measured, sort of kind of world-weary view of what happens when catastrophes keep happening over and over again. And, we live in an era where catastrophes are happening over and over again of various types. So it's actually very prescient in that way and kind of shows a different way of dealing with stressful situations than you get out of American movies where it's like, oh, there's kaiju, let's drop a nuclear bomb on it, dude. Which seems to be the denouement of almost every American kaiju film.
I mean, that's a kind of a way of looking at kaiju and a way of looking at like fighting kaiju and living with disasters. It's kind of a thing that not only goes back all the way to the roots of Tokusatsu with Godzilla 1954, but also in the works of Hideaki Anno and like Evangelion, and even going further back to Gunbuster and other films that are about like alien invasion that have a lot of the same creative staff as Shin Ultraman. And I wanted to say that even though Anno didn't direct Shin Ultraman, his style is like now so cliche and like, it's easy to replicate now. He didn't even direct it, but all you have to do is like throw some kanji on the screen, play some opera.
Well, Anno's title cards, whatever you want to call them, like those kanji filled title cards that he pioneered in Evangelion have just really percolated into Japanese pop culture and not even pop, like mainstream culture. Like you'll see like news programs using that kind of stuff now. It's amazing.
So yeah, that combination of like Hideaki Anno with Jisoji, and I don't really know what Higuchi Shinji brings to it, but I think it's that love of the source material and guys having fun with Ultraman. I feel like if an American Ultraman movie would be about a homeless guy in a red shirt named Ultraman who fights a cop in a blue shirt named Baltan. So I'm glad that they didn't try to darken it up. They didn't go in another direction. They just, quadrupled down on everything they loved about the original series.
I think Higuchi brought, like, he really grounded it, because one of the biggest issues with Shin Godzilla, which Anno directed, was the female characters, and in particular, the female, I don't even know if she's the antagonist, the daughter of the American president, who is played like a flesh and blood version of Asuka from Evangelion, and basically single-handedly proves that anime characters don't work in real life. They're not endearing. They're completely off-the-wall gonzo and even borderline annoying. So it was nice that we didn't have any anime stereotype human characters in this. Everybody is I mean, of course it's exaggerated. We're acting, it's for entertainment, but they weren't gonzo like you got in Shin Godzilla. And I think that's Higuchi's kind of more, I don't know, realistic sensibility, so to speak, or maybe he just has more experience with women. I don't know, but
So I'm glad Shin Ultraman appears to be a hit, appears to be doing well. It's being well liked, well reviewed. There's no plans for a US release. I don't know anything.
that's wild to me, by the way, that there's no plans for a US release. It's just insane.
But it was a similar thing with like the last Evangelion movie. There were no plans, and then like a week, they announced that it was going to come out like on Amazon Prime, and there it was, and
Right.
everyone devoured it. So that could happen. But I feel like we're at the dawn of a new cinematic universe, Matt. The Shin Japan heroes, because next year is Shin Kamen Rider.
And I think this was early enough in the film. In fact, it was the first seconds of the film, so we're not giving anything away. It opened with a Shin Godzilla title card, which kind of threw me off. Shin Ultraman did. So I wonder if this is hinting that Shin Ultraman, Evangelion, and Kamen Rider are all in the same universe together, and what that portends for the future.
Yeah, I mean, they have announced this collaboration project called the Shin Japan Heroes, and there's like you can
go.
see artwork with all those 4 characters together. And the first project they've announced is like some VR games at like some arcade somewhere in Japan. I bet you dollars to donuts we're going to see a Shin Ultraman versus Shin Godzilla like before too long, I would think. But there's also talk about Shin Ultra 7, Shin Return of Ultraman.
I mean, why wouldn't they keep milking this if it's I mean, this film, the theater was packed for the entire first weekend. It was tough to get tickets. So it seems like they have a hit on their hands. I would imagine that they're going to be doing a lot more of this in the future, which is fine by me.
Yeah, I'm cool with it. It's nice to have new stuff every now and then too. But call me old-fashioned if you will. I like new stuff every now and then.
We live in an era of sequels upon sequels. It's tough to imagine, like, even think of what is a new franchise that's kicked off and really taken off in the last 10 years.
Elden Ring, baby.
It's all in the video game world. It's because that's where the dynamism is, and that's where the money is, I think.
Okay. Are you going to go see it again? Because I'm trying to figure out what does the ending mean, Matt? What is the ending? Like, I didn't have that moment. It's just kind of like a fun time at the movies. But
I am going to go see it again because in another thing borrowed from typical Anno style, like the dialogue is fast and furious and thick and about 10 times denser than a normal film. So I even speaking and understanding Japanese, I'm positive I missed a lot of detail when I watched it the first time around. So I'm definitely going to go see it again.
There's a lot of scenes of people like flipping through like giant reference books. That's like a huge visual motif in the film, and that's kind of what I'm sure the script for this film must have looked like at some point.
Well, the pamphlet they were selling at the concession stand is like, "Do not open, spoilers inside," which I thought was really funny. It's like they were really serious. Like, what I really appreciate about this, the entire endeavor, is just the kind of seriousness with which everybody approached the production. You are starting to see that more in American kaiju movies, like Del Toro and like Gareth Edwards and those guys. Like, regardless of whether you think that their work stacks up to Japanese movies of that genre, they're definitely approaching it with love. Like, they don't condescend to the Japanese, and that's a good thing, because back like in the 90s, like
the 1998 Godzilla,
God, it was so condescending in so many ways, and like I don't think any of the actors really wanted to be there, and blah blah blah. You don't see that anymore, and that's great. But nobody does it like the Japanese do it. Nobody makes kaiju movies like the Japanese do it, and nobody does it like Anno and Higuchi do it. 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. I'm going to channel both of them for this.
Shin Ultraman Jabuch, says Gene Shalit from the Chicago Times. Okay, so I think that wraps it up for the first episode of Pure Tokyoscope. We'll be back next week, theoretically, with a new episode focusing on a book written by a guy named Matthew Alt called Pure Invention. Perhaps you've heard of it before.
Oh, yeah. I know that book.
Anything else going on? What are you going to do this weekend?
I'm gonna put on my Shin Ultraman cosplay and go to the theater and watch it again.
That sounds good. Okay, so thanks for listening. Check us out on Twitter. You can probably find us pretty easily. We'll be getting noisy on SNS about exciting new things in the future for the Pure Tokyoscope podcast. And so we thank you for listening.
Signing off from Neo Tokyo.